The Truth Seeker, the Seer, and the Heart by Lisa West. Chapter 1. Kyle. It's 1999 in Chamberlain High in Warwickshire, UK. Kyle is 8 years old. It was just an ordinary Tuesday, but for Kyle, it would be the day that set the course of his life and started him on a very unusual adventure indeed. The school hall was unusually quiet. The attention of the entire form was focused on the man taking centre stage at the front of the hall. Professor Christopher O'Hare was regaling the students with stories of his adventures as an archaeologist. He had a warm, booming voice, standing at 6 feet tall. He had bronze skin from working in the sun, and sandy-coloured hair which tended to flop slightly onto his forehead. He had a friendly smile, and he knew how to tell a story. He introduced himself by jauntily placing an Indiana Jones-style hat on his head, much to the delight of the students. He alternatively had the children gasping in shock or awe at his stories or laughing at some of the antics of his colleagues. His passion for his work as an archaeologist was contagious, sparking the children's imagination at the wonder of the places he had visited. Behind him was a white projector screen, which he filled with images of maps of Egypt, and colourful photos of pyramids and temples, sarcophagi and jewellery made from precious gems. He told them about the kings and queens of Egypt and how the Egyptians lived and worked, and thrilled them with stories of rituals and magic. On a table to his right on the stage, he placed artefacts borrowed from museums and private collectors to show to the children. Carl listened with round eyes, straining his neck to see over his school friend in front of him at what might be on the table. When the professor finished his presentation, he took questions from the students and asked if anyone wanted to look at any of the artefacts he had brought with him. Kyle's arms shot up so fast it was a blur, and he practically bounced in his seat hoping to be chosen. The professor laughed at the number of hands in the air. Unfortunately, I only have time to choose a few, as I'm sure your teachers are hoping to get you back to class sometime this afternoon. The professor pointed at a few raised hands, and then he pointed at Kyle. Kyle could not believe he had chosen him. He pointed to himself, and at the professor's nod, he got out of his chair with a bounce. Bubbling with excitement, he made his way to the front of the hall and up onto the stage. Kyle didn't like being the centre of attention, so it was noticeably clear how much the talk had interested him. He looked at all the artefacts on the table in wonder. Each piece had a white label underneath with typed information. There were small statues, coins, shards of pottery, and parchment with odd figures on, which the note stated were hieroglyphs. In a glass enclosed box, a necklace was shining at him. He had never seen anything like it before. Underneath, the writing said that it was an amulet that had been made to protect the wearer. Carl didn't know anything about jewellery, but he thought it was beautiful. The centrepiece held a crystal called malachite, which was a stripy green colour. It was encased in what looked like an eye. According to the note, it was the Eye of Horus. This was then surrounded by a flower. The note stated, malachite, associated with wisdom and discernment, worn to promote prophetic dreams, prophetic visions, and green being protective colour. The Eye of Horus, Egyptian symbol of protection. Flower, jasmine, for love and protection. The professor noticed Carl was transfixed by the artefacts, particularly the amulet. The other children had gone back to their seats, and the hall was slowly clearing as they made their way to their classes. Carl hadn't noticed. He was so mesmerised by the amulet. The professor came to a decision. He asked Carl if he would like to look closer at the amulet. Carl looked at him with round eyes and nodded. Smiling, the professor passed him a pair of soft white gloves to wear to protect the amulet. He put the gloves on himself, lifted the clear case off the necklace, and removed it from its silk bed. He placed it in Carl's shaking hands. As Carl looked at the amulet, he felt a tingling sensation moving up his hands, into his arms, and then through his whole body. As he looked up to question the professor, he felt dizzy. His peripheral vision grew hazy, so he closed his eyes. When the dizziness stopped, he opened them again, but he was no longer in the school hall. The sun was shining brightly in his eyes, and he shielded them with one hand as they adjusted to the unexpected sunlight. As they adjusted, he looked around him. He could see a river to his right with what looked like plants of various sizes and types growing in plots. To his left, dotted around, he could see houses, although none like he had ever seen before. He blinked and looked up and nearly swore out loud with shock. Before his very unbelieving eyes, he was astonished to see a pyramid, just like in the professor's photos. His mouth hung open in complete surprise. He closed his eyes, rubbed them, and looked again. No, it was not his imagination, as there, in the background, dwarfing the landscape, was a pyramid. It didn't look complete, as if it was still being built. He couldn't help it. This time he did swear. He was interrupted from his swearing by a soft chuckle behind him, and whirling around, he looked up at the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. She had kind brown eyes and long dark hair, and she was wearing strange clothing which looked completely at home in her surroundings. She had a gentleness about her, and he felt as if she could look directly into his soul. He caught his breath, as smiling at him, she reached out for the necklace that he'd forgotten he was holding. "You found it," she said, smiling. He was passing the necklace to her when he felt the tingling start again in his hands. He wanted to shout no. He wasn't ready to leave yet. But before he could do or say anything else, his vision blurred once more. He closed his eyes to combat the dizzying feeling, and when he opened them again, he found himself back in the school hall.